Hi, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for being here. My name's Holly. Today I'm reading Karen stories from Reddit. Let's get into it. Karen looking for her daily hit of adrenaline. I work in a movie theater. A few years back, I got a call to take a family upstairs to the crying room. While I waited by the elevator for the family to arrive, I can hear someone yapping away like they're pissed off. But it's not my problem, so I ignore it. Seconds later, here comes the family. It's the mom and two boys aged 2ish and 6. They were holding way too much. Mom has two large popcorns and a large drink in hand, and the 6-year-old is barely hanging on to another large popcorn, and the 2-year-old as well has his own large soda, and the size of his torso, and is clearly struggling to hold it. I greet them and take the pass, but the mom says nothing. At least, not until after we get into the elevator. As soon as the door closes, she starts, "Question for you. How do you guys expect people to carry all of this food?" Oh my gosh. I'm confused at first, since in the several years I've worked for a theater, no one has ever asked me this, because people tend to only buy what they can carry and eat themselves. This Karen clearly went overboard, and for some reason wanted to make it our problem. I couldn't think of a satisfactory explanation fast enough, so I answered with your hands? Cue Karen explosion. Mommy goes off and starts yelling in the elevator at me. I recognize her shrill squealing. She was the person shitting themselves in the lobby, probably screeching at concessions for the same non-issue. She starts talking so fast, I can barely understand what she's saying to me except for the occasional cuss. Cussing you out in front of her children. Classy. I can already tell she can't be properly reasoned with and apologized for the misused words and took her to the room without another word. She yapped and chewed me out the whole walk to the room, but I kept quiet until they were settled, then just left without asking them if they needed anything because fuck that. Yeah, not your circus, not your monkeys. This commenter says, "What's a crying room?" I was wondering that too. What's a crying room? It's a small soundproof room up above the back of some of the auditoriums for families with children they know are going to cry during the movie. Oh, I didn't know they had that. That's pretty cool, actually. Karen gets angry that I won't answer her questions. So this happened years ago, but it's too good of a story not to share. Truly the most Karen experience that I've ever experienced. I was standing in the sporting goods section of a big box store with my husband. We were deciding whether to buy croquet or badminton for our 4th of July party. Suddenly we hear, "Do you know anything about these knee pads?" She shouted it over the aisle. I had no reason to think that she was talking to us, so we continued with our deliberation. She then appeared around the corner and repeats her question. "Do you know anything about these knee pads?" I looked at her confused and simply said, "I'm sorry, we don't work here." Karen, "I know, I just thought you might." I interrupted with, "I think you're making a lot of assumptions about us." Karen, "Ugh, I thought at least a nice one might be able to help me." He'd not spoken. She had no reason to assume that he was nice. Besides, I wasn't not nice. Finally, he knows nothing more about knee pads than I do, which is absolutely nothing. She storms off, and we continue our shopping. She was in front of us as we were checking out, and she made sure to give us another huff and glare before she left the store. Jeez. Why couldn't you find an employee to ask these questions? This person says, "Once you told her you did not work there, she should have let it go. If you knew about knee pads, you would have told her that you don't work there and then told her what you knew about knee pads." For real. Karen thought she was being insulted when she wasn't. One of my sisters worked for a particular restaurant some years ago, and this story she has told me is still pretty crazy to this day. Now, usually, whenever a restaurant gets a new item on the menu, the staff is encouraged to suggestive sell, thus asking customers if they would like to try the new product. Some do, some don't. Anyway, the restaurant gets a new ambrosia salad, and the manager, of course, tells the staff to suggestive sell it. The day pretty much goes well. Cue the Karen. So a heavyset woman walks in. This is relevant to the story, and asks to be seated. The waitress walks over to her table, greets her pleasantly, and asks the woman if she would like to try their new ambrosia salad. Remember, the waitress is only suggestive selling. Immediately, the woman goes into a tirade of shouting and complaining. What are you trying to say? Are you calling me fat? Are you saying that I need to lose weight? The waitress tries to assure her that that wasn't the case, but the Karen is not having it. I have a right to order whatever I want, and you are not going to stand there and tell me that I only need a salad. Hearing the banshee of a Karen screaming at the waitress, the manager immediately rushes over and asks what the problem is. Your waitress stood there and called me fat to my face and told me I only needed a salad. The waitress tells the manager, I only asked her if she wanted to try our new ambrosia salad. I was only trying to promote the product. The manager tells Karen, Ma'am, she's only suggestive selling a new food item that we have. We do that with all of our products that we get. Of course, the Karen wasn't having it. No, she called me fat. I want the corporate number now. The waitress says, Ma'am, I did no such thing. I'm only trying to promote a new item. Karen still wasn't listening. I want the number to your corporate office right now. I will not stand here and be fat shamed by your staff. So the manager gets her the phone number and she leaves. Later, the office calls the restaurant and tells them that Karen called them and said that she was being fat shamed. The manager and the waitress gave them the full story of what happened. Neither the manager nor the waitress received any repercussions. Everyone on staff that day had a good laugh about the whole ordeal. Even better, they never saw the Karen again. Karen attacks disabled vet. First, I'm going to describe myself since it will be useful later. I am a disabled military veteran who is 6'4" and 240 pounds. Ooh, big guy. Thank you for your service. I'm a big man that is mostly muscle since I still work out. I also have a concealed weapon permit and I carry it all times since I work security as a side job. Now for a story. I went shopping at a big grocery store. I am just slowly filling my cart, wearing my military jacket and my military hat. I am a bit slower since I have to take my time. I am in an aisle and I am looking for my favorite brand of bread when I hear a voice ask where the flour is. I turn to see 100% classic Karen. She is about 40 with blonde hair and say aisle 5 since I happen to know where it is. She then says, then go get it. I replied, I am shopping, not an employee. She then says, you were in the military and now serve me. What? I am stunned and it takes just a moment until I reply, what? She says, you heard me. Go get my stuff. You must serve me. I simply say no. I go to walk away and she says, hey, get my stuff and quit faking being hurt. I simply try to keep going, but she grabs and in the process hits the firearm under my arm. She then screams, he's got a pew pew, he's got a pew pew. Of course, this immediately triggers a safety protocol in the store. I try to step away and quickly see security coming down the aisle, and Karen then pours on the waterworks saying that I pulled a pew pew on her and threatened to kill her. At this point, I am making slow movements saying, I am a security officer. The manager arrives and knows me since we're good friends and knows my job. About 2 minutes later, the police arrive and I am standing there with my hands up. Oh no. I quickly state I am a security guard. They are cautious, but since I am cooperating, they treat me with some respect. I allow them to remove my firearm. They are fairly nice as I show them my permit. I am then approached by another officer that took my firearm who says you have a nice weapon. Now I admit I do carry a bit of an overkill since I carry a collectible 50 caliber Desert Eagle pistol. I can hear Karen in the next aisle where she had been taken to get her statement. She is screaming about how I pulled my weapon on her and put it to her head and pretended to pull the trigger. I am just shaking my head. At this point, the manager arrives with an officer carrying a tablet. The officer in charge looks at the security footage and then nods at another officer. I then hear the officer tell Karen, being told she was under arrest, and she starts screaming at the top of her lungs, and then hears a slap. The officer in charge takes off towards the action. I hear him scream, "Pew pew!" I then hear a wrestling match and finally hear, "Secure!" I have been associated with law enforcement for years. I know what that means. Karen is now screaming and doing the usual, "Do you know who I am?" I see her being quite violent out of the store. The officer comes up and hands me my firearm, unloaded. I take it and slip it into the clip, then into my holster. They apologize and I ask what happened. He said Karen grabbed the officer's weapon. I just say, "Oh." He says, "Yeah, she's in a bit of trouble." Wow! The manager then approached, apologizing and trying to cover his butt. I say, "No problem," and move on. I'm checking out, and the manager just walks up and takes over and comps my entire $225 order. I accept and move on, thinking the entire thing is over. 3 weeks later, I receive a summons in the mail that this woman was attempting to sue me for the incident. I am stunned, but contact my attorney asking what's going on. He has me bring the paperwork, and I drop them off later that day. He quickly looks at it and says, "Let me ask the court." I say, "Okay," and leave. I am at work in the evening when he calls me, almost laughing, saying it's all about your incident at the store, claiming she was harmed by you pulling your weapon. He then says, "I reviewed the security video and will be taking it to court to dismiss the entire matter." He says, "Trust me, they will." He also told me that she was out on a $5 million bond that her husband put up. He also says her husband is a bigwig in a huge chemical company. Oh, so she's misentitled. I finish my shift and I go home. The next day I'm at home and someone knocks on the door. There's a large man who simply says, "Drop the charges, or else," and walks away. My lawyer tells me that it has been dropped about 2 days later. Basically, I went to court and simply gave my statement and let it proceed. I found out later that Karen was convicted on all charges despite her $150,000 lawyer. I am not sure how long she was incarcerated, but I know it was several years and her husband divorced her. I moved out a year later and now shop at a much better store. All right, that's all for today. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a lovely day. Bye!